Let's do it. It's not such a hard daf actually, but it's good to get into a new Masechta.
It's amazing. I was like so excited on Friday.
I mean, this one's pretty long too, to be honest, but Yevamot just went on for a long time. And it's hard. Hard till the end.
What's wrong? Ketubot is hard?
Yeah, they're both hard. I mean, Ketubot's not so easy. There's a lot of concepts in Ketubot that are very complex that we'll get to.
Okay. All right.
But the beginning's not so hard. So today's daf is daf Dalid, and I assume well, where should we start? You want to start at the Breita on the bottom of Gimel Amud Bet?
Exactly. Like Gimel Amud Bet. Okay, I went all the way to Davka, but I'm very happy to start like at the.
Well, let's read quickly. I'll read quickly from the Breita because what we're talking about, just the Breita introduces today's daf, which really gets repeated. Right. The question really is that the Mishnah started off saying that marriages should happen at a certain time, but that there could be exceptions, right? And there could be exceptions because of worry about health, and we talked about that, what that means, sakana. And there could be exceptions due to ones meaning circumstances beyond one's control. And says the Gemara today, it's actually something like a death in the family. As the Breita says, person baked the bread already, they slaughtered the animals, yeno mazug, they prepared the wine, they diluted the wine. And then, as they're making all these catering preparations, mate aviv shel chatan or ima shel kala, the father of the chatan or the mother of the kala, and we talked before, right? Those are very important people in terms of supporting the father supports the chatan and the mother supports the kala. Then what do, right? So you're in a really bad situation. There's a dead relative, which is both a sad thing, but also a thing where you have responsibility and a halachic requirement of avelut, as we learned in Moed Katan. Says the Breita, machnisin et hameit l'cheder. What you do is you isolate the mate. You don't leave the mate in front of you, of course, because that requires a whole different level of avelut. But you bring the mate into a side room, and you continue on with the plans. At the chatan v'tekala lechuppah, and then top of daf dalid, and they go to the chuppah and they sing all the songs. And boel bilat mitzvah, and then they sleep together for the first time, bilat mitzvah, and then poresh. Then they have to separate. We'll see what that means for separation, but they can't continue to live together or spend time together or sleep together. The noheg shivat mishta continues the Breita, but you don't, go to the funeral. You do 7. Well, you might go to the funeral, but you don't have the funeral. Then you don't have the avelut. Then you have 7 days of mishta of shavar brachot, and then achakach noheg shivat yimei avelut, and then you have the 7 days of avelut because once basically the wedding celebration started, you continue and at doche the avelut.
So we're only talking here about like the father or the mother, specifically of each of the groom or the bride. What happens if it's a brother or a sister, which actually require also the same level of avelut, or almost?
Right. So we're going to discuss a little bit more, but presumably it would be the same thing. But let's keep going. But because we're assuming, well, let's keep going, but presumably it'd be the same thing. And the basic principle is that, there's a mitzvah of avelut, there's a requirement for avelut, there's a requirement of simcha, and we push off the avelut in front of the simcha of the wedding. However, ve'in monit, we'll continue Zimar, ve'in the Breita, in those days, meaning especially the 7 days of mishteh, they don't sleep together. They have the first biyah, but then they separate. He sleeps with the men, she sleeps with the women, meaning they have someone else in the house, or they're separated physically because they're not allowed to sleep with each other, like avelim are not allowed to, but they're not knowing avelut, right? So it's avelut of tzina. But for 30 days, meaning even in the first 30 days, so Rashi understands it, and certainly beyond that, we don't make her make herself beautiful, right. The doorman, because we want her to be beautiful for her husband. So we don't want her to be mitkaneh, they look disgusting for her husband. Says the Breita, as you just asked, dafka aviv shel chatan or ima shel kala. It's specifically the father of the chatan or the mother of the kala, the leka inish titarchu. Because the problem is, again, we're going to keep going. This may not be accepted in the end, but there may be, in those cases, the concern is they're the fundamental person who prepares for the wedding. The father of the
Right.
Khatan either pays for it, again, we don't do this necessarily today, and the mother of Kala, gets her beautiful and helps her get dressed, and etc. And they're ready for the wedding. So the problem is that if you delay this by a week or 2 weeks, they won't have the aviv or the ima to do it. However, according to this, let's say it was the opposite. It was the Kala's father or brother or sister, as you put it. Then it wouldn't be a problem. You go ahead, you have the funeral, you delay the wedding, and then a week later you get married, or a month later, or whatever time, and you have someone there to prepare for the wedding. But the opposite, it wouldn't be that case. And again, the Rishonim talk about a lot that this, of course, depends on norms for who prepares for the wedding. Right? If things have changed and it's no longer the Aviv Shel Chatan, which it probably isn't anymore, right? Then it might be very different. Now, says Rav from Bar Papa Rav Chisda, this is only this is only the case if they started marinating the meat. Literally means they put water on the meat, meaning they already are preparing. You slaughter an animal, I guess the meat comes out. I mean, it must be very watery because it's full of blood, but I guess it dries out a little. I guess you salt it and it dries out. But if you then put water on it, you basically have to start cooking it right away. And if you don't, it gets ruined. It gets rotten. Right. So therefore, you can't delay the wedding and use the meat in 2 weeks. You're not going to have 2 weeks of meat.
Right.
But if you didn't actually start preparing the basar, then mizdaban, then you could always sell it. Right. You can go out to the market and say 50 pounds of beautiful steaks here, and people will buy it, and it has got a resale value. And then you just use that money and make a wedding after the funeral and after the shiva. Says Rava, well, it really depends on the market. If you live in a big city, if you live in New York, right, or Jerusalem, maybe, even if you already put water on the meat, misdaban, you can go sell it, because even though it's going to go bad in 2 days, or there's enough of a market, people are making a wedding tomorrow or whatever, that you can go to a shuk and actually sell things, and it's the last day that you can use them. And says Rav Papa B'Kfar, if you actually live in a tiny little village, then even if you didn't put water on the basar, lo mizdaban, you won't be able to sell it, because no one's buying 50 pounds of rib steaks here, even if they're can be used the next month. It's just not a market. It says, well, if that's the case, that no matter, it depends on the size of the city. There Rav Chisda, who said it depends on whether you put water. So where would he actually have said that? Amar Vashi, well, there's a lot of in-between places, right? You go on Mata Mechasya, like the city of Mata Mechasya, or many other cities like that. The Mafka Mikrach, it's not a big city, it's not like a metropolis. Well, Mafka Mikfar, but it's not a village. So it's somewhere in the middle, and there, there's a market that they sell food. It's like having kosher food, in a middle market place. I don't want to say any place to make anyone feel bad, but say Elizabeth, New Jersey, I'm going to pick on. The Mafka Mikrach, Umafka Mikfar, right? It's not big, it's not small, and so that's where it depends on how long the meat's going to last for. Tanya Kavatei Rav Chisda, in fact, there's a brayta that says exactly what Rav Chisda said. You have your bread baked, tivchot tavuach, your animals have all been slaughtered. Yeno mazug, the wine is prepared. V'natan mayim al gabe basar. So this brayta specifically says they put water on the meat. And meit aviv shel chatan mimashal kala, which we said in this shot so far is specific. Then machnisin et meit l'cheder. You bring the corpse into a room, you separate it, and the chatan and the kala go to the chuppah, and they get married. While bilat mitzvah poresh, then they have to separate. And this brayta says noheg shivati me'amishteh v'achar kach noheg shivati me'avelot, which is exactly what we said in the first brayta. He sleeps among the men, she sleeps among the women. And this brayta now adds another detail, which is going to be very important in the rest of today's daf. Continues the second brayta, the same thing is true if someone's wife became a nida, she started menstruating, so she became a nida. Then we're not exactly sure what this means. It sounds like after the wedding, right? Just like right before the wedding, someone died and they became an aval or an avela. Right before the wedding, a woman became a nida. So then they go ahead, they get married, presumably. But hu yashem bein hanashim, he yashena bein hanashim. But they also do not sleep together, because obviously a man cannot sleep with a woman who's a nida. And so we separate them. Though this obviously sounds very foreign. We don't do this, right? People don't live in different houses in the Jewish tradition, at least, when they're nida. But this is what the brayta says: he sleeps among the men, she sleeps among the women, and finishes the brighter like the previous one. Ein monin tachshitim min hakala kol shel shimyon, which presumably goes back on if someone died in the family, right? We still don't prevent her from wearing tachshitin even during the 30 days. And benkach ubenkach, but either way, again, we'll see in the Gemara later what either way means. Lo yivol lo be'erev Shabbat lo b'mitzvah Shabbat. A person shouldn't have the initial bia, the initial intercourse, either on the night of Shabbat, which does not mean erev Shabbat, it means leil Shabbat.
Oh, yeah.
But it means getting married on erev Shabbat, so that the bia is that night
Right.
on leil Shabbat because of the chabura, because you make a womb.
Mhm.
So she's betula, and not on Motzei Shabbat. The Gemara is going to discuss. Maybe we'll do it today, maybe not. Why not on Motzei Shabbat? Now, that's the second bright. Says the Gemara. Let's try to understand the second bright. Right? It says Amar Mar. Now this it says in both bright. Hu yashem ben hanashim, he yashena ben hanashim. The man sleeps among the men. The woman sleeps among the women. Says the Gemara. That's Messiah le Rabbi Yochanan. That supports Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Afal pisham rein avelut b'moed. Even though we have a principle that there's no avelut on Chol HaMoed, or you don't observe avelut when it's Chol HaMoed, even if you haven't had a funeral yet, even if you etc. Any circumstance.
You still have owner.
But things that are in private, you do are no and obviously sleeping together is in private. So although you do have the Shivati Mea Mishtan, so you have the meals and you're dancing and you're singing, but you don't in private sleep together. Because even though you're not being Noeg Avelut in public, you still, according to Rabbi Yochanan, have to be Noeg Avelut in private.
Is it possible that's because of that they wanted the man to sleep with the man and the women with the women so that they wouldn't be tempted to actually get together?
Yeah, sorry, that's the explanation. Yeah, that's what it's saying. That you enforce basically separation. Darish Rav Yosef Breder Rava Mishmei de Rava. Now, Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, according to his father Rava, is saying, Lo Shamnu Ela Shelo Ba'al. The only time that we force them to separate and not to sleep in the same room or without other people is if they never slept together previously. Aval Ba'al, but if they have previously slept together and then they became prohibited, then Ishto Yishena Ima, his wife can sleep with him. And the rationale behind that is that if someone has never engaged before, there's a much bigger temptation, right? So it's a newness and a temptation, and there we say don't be together before the first bia. But if they've already slept together and then she becomes prohibited to him, then they can sleep together. They can sleep in the same room, meaning they can sleep together, but they can sleep in the same room. We're not worried they're going to do something inappropriate. But that doesn't make any sense. Our Braita is biba'al askina. It's referring to a case where they slept together because it said that, right? It said boel bilat mitzvah, and then it says katani hu yashem ben anashim yashem ben anashim. So how can you say that once they've slept together, you don't worry anymore about them being together? Clearly in our Braita, that's not true. So this is where you're right. That's true about avelut. Kika Amar, when Rav Yosef quoted his father Rav is saying was apirsa ishto nida. It's referring to halacha of a nida. That if a person is getting married and his wife is a nida, if he never slept with her before, then they can't even sleep together in the same room. But if they've slept together, because we're afraid that they're going to be over, even though they're not supposed to, and sleep together. But if they have, then it's not a problem. So only referring to nida. It says, well, that's not what it says in the Braita. It says v'chein katan. It says similar. They're the same halacha. It says the Gemara on the bet, down on the bet, hachikama. This is what the Braita means. The same thing would be true, just like by an avel. Just like we say by an avel, since they're not allowed to sleep with each other, have intercourse with each other, they can't sleep together in the same room. The same thing would be true about a man who marries a woman, and before they sleep together at the wedding, she becomes a nida, and he's lo ba'al. He's never yet slept with her. So then we don't want them to be together. We're afraid the temptation is going to be too great. And then hu yashem ben hanashim, v'ishto yashena ben hanashim. But if they had already slept together, then it's not a problem. Says the Gemara Lamembra, what that implies is that avelut kalya le'menida, that a person will think of avelut as less extreme than nida. Meaning, if you say to someone who's an avel, you're not allowed to sleep with this woman, but we'll let you sleep together in the same room, he might come to sleep with her. So we have to separate them. Because in a person's mind, it's not as big a deal as a nida, which clearly in a person's mind is a very big deal. So as long as they have had that initial bia, we let them sleep together. But is that true? What about the following halacha? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Chanina, Rav Huna. It says Rabbi Yitzchak bar Chanina said the name of Rav Huna. Kol melachot sheisha oseh leba'ala, right? Any of the normal things that a woman will do for her husband, these are done basically out of obligation. We'll discuss this much later in this Masechet. Any of those things, nida oseh leba'ala, nida continues to do for her husband. I mean, they don't have to totally separate. They can still engage in regular activities, cooking for him, cleaning for him, sewing for him, things like that. Chutz mimezigat kos, except for three things. One is giving him his cup to drink because that's a very provocative thing. He gets drunk or it's very intimate, so we're worried that's going to come lead to inappropriate things. And hatza'at hamita, and making up the bed. It's not so clear what that means. Tosus points out it probably does not mean putting on the sheets, right? It's just the tircha, but it means making it pretty or making it more comfortable or putting down something nice. So something that's very suggestive, which in the bedroom you would have, and harchatzat panav yadav raglav, and washing his feet and his face. Right? So
Yeah,
actually
that's intimate.
washing him. So which again is a very intimate thing. So
Yeah.
all of these things, even though she's allowed to generally do whatever she's supposed to generally do for her husband with her husband, when she's a nida, she shouldn't do these very, very intimate things. So that's halacha about nida. But by avelut, now remember, it seems to imply from sleeping together that we're more worried about an avel, that they're going to do something inappropriate than a nida. That's why we have to separate them physically. Why a nida, we don't separate them physically once they've had the initial via, right? But by avelut tanya, there's a brighter which says, afa pishamru, even though they say that when a woman is an avel, an avela, ein adam rashai lechofet ishto liot kochel to liot pokesed. A person cannot force his wife, right, to, if she's mourning and she says, I don't want to put on makeup, I don't want to look good. It's a kochel. The pokesed usually means some kind of Rashi's kochel, means around the eyes, right? Kochel means you're putting eyelash or something, whatever. Eye makeup, and pokesed, not so clear. Pokesed means there's a lot of different
Face powder.
So some say, right, powder on the face. Some say it's rouge, which I guess is face powder. Some say it's like a mask, that you put on, but it doesn't look good. But when you peel it off, it looks good. But it depends on. We discussed this in Moikad. But either way, so a woman who says, I'm mourning my parent, one of my siblings died. I don't want to put on makeup. I don't care that I look terrible. So you can't force, a man cannot say to his wife, which generally he could. You have a responsibility to look presentable, whatever that means. When she's mourning, he can't force her. However, they said that she can still do things for him. She does. She gives him his cup to drink. So you see that even though she's an avela, right, she is allowed, and not only allowed, but maybe required to still do things that are intimate for him. And Anida, we don't allow her to do that. But which implies, which is not unreasonable, that Anida is more chamor, right, which is fine. But the problem is that by sleeping together, we said the opposite. We said that even if they slept together once, if she's an avela, they can't sleep together. They can't sleep even in the same room. But a nida can sleep together in the same room. Says the Gemara, well, it depends. Lokasha kan avelut dide, kan avelut dida. It depends on whether she's a mourning because, right, so they can't sleep together if either one is a mourner, right, the man or the woman. But the question is which one specifically is mourning? Says the Gemara, if she is mourning, which is the second right that we just quoted, right, she can't put on makeup or she doesn't want to put on makeup, she's the one in mourning, right? So then we're not worried she's going to come to sleep with him because she's very upset, right? She's mourning. And so she can do intimate things for him because she has no desire to go further. But if it was him who was mourning, then we worry that if she does intimate things for him, such as sleeping in the same room as him, right, then it's going to lead to a situation where they're actually sleep together. Now, why that's the case is not, right? There's a lot of different interpretations and discussions about why. Some just say it's male, female, that women are more sensitive. I think there's a Tosis that says this. And she's more sensitive to the avelut, and she can control herself better and say no, but he would just, give in to his desire and sleep with her even if he's an avel. That's one pshat. There's other pshatim, right? But either way, there's a difference then we're saying between whether she's an avel, in which case we don't worry they're going to come sleep together, she's going to stop it, or he's an avel where we do worry. Well, that's a nice explanation, but the Braita did not say only where he's an avel. It said ha'aviv shel chatano ima shel kala ketani. It said if you cook the meal, everything's ready, the wine is poured, and either the father of the chatan, which is his avelut, or the mother of the kala, which is her avelut, died. So that's not what you just said. You said it specifically. It's him. This is why you're right. That's kitani ashara. That refers to everything else, saying you don't have to do the burial. You can push off the burial. You can have seven days of mishtah. But in truth, the fact that we say you separate the man and the woman only is true if he is the one who's mourning, because we don't trust him. We don't trust that if he sleeps in the same room as her, he's not going to lead to actually sleeping together with. Says the Gemara, "Ni shani ben aveluti de la aveluti da." Now, is it really true that there's a difference between whether the man is an avel and the woman is an avel in the way the house behaves? Tanya, there's another bright about avelut which says that mi shemet chamiv o chamoto. If a person's father-in-law or mother-in-law, meaning his wife's parents, died, one of them, right? He can't force his wife to put on makeup. She's mourning. Her father or mother died. Ella kofemitato, but he does turn over the bed. Remember, that was one of the acts of mourning where basically you slept on the floor, but he turned over the bed so that it was uncomfortable. And noheg ima avelut, a husband, even though it's not his parents, has to be noheg avelut with his wife, meaning he does whatever she does, basically. The he, and the same thing is true about a woman, a wife. Shemet chamia o chamuta, her father-in-law, mother-in-law, meaning her husband's father or mother died. Same thing. Eino rashaliot kechat. She can't make herself look nice. She can't say, "Oh, I'm not in mourning." Ela kofa mitatav noheget imo avelut. She turns over the bed and is an avel with her husband. So you see, it sounds like that whichever one is an avel, the spouse has to take it upon themselves to have all the same practices of avelut. Says the Gemara, well, to me, you should add words to that, because you're right, there are differences. If it's avelut didei, if it's the wife's avelut, meaning her husband or her father or mother died, then she can't, if it's avelut of her, then hu yashem ben anashim, v'shto yashem, it's opposite. It's his avelut, sorry, that's what I meant. His avelut, then not the day, then hu yashem ben anashim, v'shto yashem ben anashim, there's something extra. Because if he's an avel, we don't trust him. And then he's got to sleep separate from his wife during the days of avelut. She's an avel, we sort of trust her that she's not going to let it lead to anything more, and they can sleep in the same bed together. Again, but it says that it's the same thing. Well, it's the same for some things. Right? It's the same for makeup. But imo katani. It says they are noeg imo avelut. They're avelim together. Well, my love, imo b'mita. They're together like they normally are. No. It means imo babayit. It means they're avelim in the same house, but not in the same bedroom or bed. Like Chia said to his son, whose wife, was in mourning. So son's wife was her husband, her father or mother died. No, ba'apa, when you're in front of her, meaning when you're with her, nahog aveluta, you have to be an avel just like her. But the lo ba'apa lo tinog aveluta, when you're not in front of her, you don't have to be an avel, right? Meaning, it's only in the presence when you're with the person who's in mourning that you, as a spouse, are supposed to have mourning. But when you're not in the presence of that person, you don't have to worry and don't have to observe avelut. And that's what it means when it says noheg ima or noheg imo avelut. It doesn't mean together in the same bed necessarily, meaning you live together. It means when you're with that person, you act as an avel and follow all the customs of avelut. Rav Ashi says, well, mi kamidamet aveluta dahacha, aveluta da'alma, right? You can't compare. Meaning, the original question was, we said by an avel in general that they can, avel can do all the things for her husband. We're not worried they're going to come to sleep together. But we said by the wedding situation, that we don't allow them to even sleep together in the same room, right? We make him sleep with the men and she sleep with the women. Says Rav Ashi, it's because they're very different cases of avelut. Can you compare this situation of the wedding, right? Where they're walking down the aisle, the father of the chassan dies, sadly. They put him inside and keep going down the aisle. That's obviously not similar to every other case of avelut. Why not? Avelut, the alma, general avelut, it's chamir. People take it very, very seriously. But and lo atil zalzuli bay. And if you allow them to drink and eat together, they're not going to come to sleep with each other. But avelut hacha, right here, we broke all the rules. Kiva da kilo berabana. We were very maker. We said, forget about avelut. Don't even worry about the 7 days. Go and have the wedding, dance it up a storm. You can even sleep together initially, right? Well, bilat mitzvah. Have 7 days of mishteh. So if we let them actually spend those days in the same house, the same bed, then atil zozuli bay, we're worried that they're going to be mizalzel and not take it seriously and sleep together. My kula, what kula are you referring to? Says the Gemara, the kula, I just said a few of them, but if it's because you said they could sleep together, that's only because you didn't bury the person yet, right? That's not a unique halacha here. It's true about any avilut. Just when somebody dies, avilut doesn't start until something. What's the time? Either Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's when they take the dead or the corpse out of the house, to actually leave the house on their way to their final journey. Or the Rabbi Yoshua, it's even when they're buried, until they're covering either the dirt or the coffin is put over the body. So, or if they didn't have dirt, right? If they're burying in a cave, it would be when you close up the cave. But clearly that's not a kula. It's because avilut didn't start yet. Ella, it's referring to Ketani Noheg Shivat Mishteh. It's referring to the fact that we allow you to have 7 days of mishteh, wedding, which obviously you would never do after a funeral before avilut, and then Achar Kach Noheg Shivat Avilut. And so therefore, because of that halacha, right, that we were very makel basically, and we allowed you to, this person, to go on and have the wedding and have 7 days of simcha before they did the avilut, we're afraid that the person's not going to take the avilut seriously. And that during those 7 days, they're going to be partying so much, having such a good time. It makes a lot of sense that if they are in the same room, they're going to end up sleeping together, even though they're not allowed to. And so therefore, we physically separate them or physically have other people in the room to prevent that from happening. So that's the reason. Let's do a few more lines. Why not? Amar Mar, getting back to the Braita, which said at the end, Benkach u'benkach lo yivol. Either way, you should not have a bi'ah, meaning you should not have a wedding to have a bi'ah, lo be'erev Shabbat, neither on Friday night. Oh, Motzei Shabbat. Says more, well, I understand. Bishma erev Shabbat, you shouldn't have them sleep together Friday night. You should chabura, because if she is a betula, then his act of sleeping with her will make a wound, and that's a chabura, and it's a melacha of Shabbat, and it's not tocha Shabbat. But Motzei Shabbat, why shouldn't you be allowed to sleep together on Motzei Shabbat? Says the Gemara, or have a wedding so you can sleep together on Motzei Shabbat. Amar Reb Zera mishum cheshbonot. The reason is because
you have to add up
well, if you're having a wedding either Motzei Shabbat right after Shabbat, and then you're going to sleep together, then obviously, like everyone knows, right? Whenever you do something Saturday night, you're preparing all Shabbat to calculate, prepare the food, and so you're not allowed to do cheshbonot on Shabbat for after Shabbat, and so therefore they discouraged it from happening on Motzei Shabbat. Now we're going to stop here, but tomorrow's daf we will see that that's not really true, because in fact you are allowed to do these kind of cheshbonot on Shabbat because it's a mitzvah, and the Gemara is going to come out with a whole new reason why you shouldn't get married on Saturday night.
Excellent, thank you. So what
pleasure
happened?
Learning?
My learning?
I said it was a pleasure learning.
Oh yes, absolutely. Same here. So I was going to ask you, did Evie go to camp?
Evie went to camp. She had an incredible time at camp.
Great.
She came home on Tuesday night. I came home Wednesday morning. She went back chemo on Wednesday already. So, and it was pretty rough, but we spent Shabbat together, and she's doing much better already. So.
Okay, good.
So she had a great time.
All right. Glad to hear.
Actually, they even made a little video. I'll share it maybe. I don't know. I'll share it. She looks really good in it. I don't really understand the message, but she looks really good in it. So
okay.
It's worth it to see her looking good.
I know.
Okay.
I know.
Have a great week, and we'll be in touch. Maybe I'll see you next Sunday morning.
Maybe. Okay, thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.